This weekend was one of the hardest decisions the playoff committee has ever had to make during the playoff era. They had 6 legit teams that could have had a case for getting into the playoffs. The top 2 teams were pretty clear to most people, as it was Michigan and Washington. Michigan and Washington obviously cemented themselves in the playoffs, being undefeated in a Power 5 conference along with the wins they've had on the season. But then you had Alabama, who just beat the number 1 team in the country. And although they had some bad games this year, when this team plays their best game, they are a very scary team. And they haven't lost since week 2. But beating Georgia, who had a 29-game winning streak and were back-to-back national champions, was very impressive. But then you had a team like Texas, who didn't have as tough of a resume as Alabama has had, but they had a head-to-head win over Alabama. Both Alabama and Texas only have 1 loss on the season. But then you had another team with a case for the college football playoffs, like Georgia, who only lost 1 game all year, and they lost it by 3 in the SEC championship. But ultimately, they didn't win that conference, and a lot of people knew it'd be harder for Georgia to get in, even though they were back-to-back national champions. But there was still some talk about them possibly sneaking their way in. But then you had another team who it was hard to believe that they were going to leave out, which was Florida State, who was ultimately 13-0. But they had an X factor missing to their team, whose name was Jordan Travis. So going into Sunday, there were 5 legit conference championship winners and the back-to-back national champions in the picture. But ultimately, the most controversial decision out of all of them happened, with the committee deciding to leave undefeated Florida State out of the playoffs instead of leaving a 1-loss Alabama or a 1-loss Texas out. The final 4 ended up being number 1 Michigan, and at number 2 was Washington, and number 3 was Texas, and of course number 4 was Alabama. And the undefeated Florida State Seminoles were on the outside looking in. So in this video, I wanted to talk about how I feel about the decision to leave Florida State out of the playoffs. But I also wanted to look at some of the big bowl games coming up, and I wanted to just give my complete thoughts on this past weekend. But before I get into this video, here's a reminder to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also turn on notifications so you never miss an upload, because we post daily college football videos, and I apologize for missing an upload yesterday. We hardly miss uploads, but we did miss an upload yesterday. But I'm trying my best to stay consistent, and it's rare for me to miss uploads. But anyways, without further ado, let's get into the video. So to start, I want to start off with giving my thoughts on Florida State being left out. And let's be real, does Florida State look like a top 4 team with that offense they have? I would say absolutely not. They do not look like a top 4 team. But I also don't agree with Florida State being left out, because ultimately it's never been about who's the 4 best teams, even though that's what it's supposed to be. Every single year up to 2023 in the playoff era, they've always chosen who was the most deserving. But this year, ironically, they leave an undefeated Florida State team out for an SEC team with 1 loss. The only year the SEC had a chance to get left out, they decided to leave an undefeated Florida State out. And even though in the handbook you're supposed to pick the best teams, the College Football Playoff Committee is just completely opinion-based. And I believe a big factor of leaving Florida State out was the reality of the outcome being the SEC would have got left out, which would have hurt a lot of feelings as well. And the SEC has never been left out of the playoffs. But I mean, any way you look at it, people aren't going to be happy. But I believe Florida State should have been in, because although they haven't looked great, how are you going to pick 13 guys to decide who looks better when Florida State ultimately went 13-0 and Alabama lost 1 game and couldn't take care of business earlier in the season? And I get it. We are looking at how these teams are playing now, and I feel there's no reason a 13-0 Power 5 conference champion should be left out for a 1-loss team, no matter the outcome. Because in that case, what's the point of playing the games? And I say let the outcome of the games matter. Like I've said before, I'll say it again. The team is called Florida State. The team is not called Jordan Travis. It just puts down all the hard work this team has put in all year just because they got 1 injured player on the team. But honestly, I'm not too mad about Florida State getting left out, because it was a really tough decision to make. Being Alabama just beat the number 1 team in the country and they were back-to-back national champions. And Texas also had a legitimate case to be over Alabama. But if I made the decision, I would have had Florida State in the playoffs, because they at least deserved a chance for overcoming the adversity throughout the whole season. But ultimately, my opinion doesn't even matter that much, because no matter what the outcome is, if Alabama would have got left out, people would have hated on the committee anyways. Because Alabama obviously looks like a top 4 team in the country, and they just beat the number 1 team in the country who's on a 29-game winning streak and back-to-back national champions. This is why I think we need a computer-based ranking system instead of an opinion-based. But no matter what happens, there's always going to be accusing people of bias within the committee. But hopefully this is the last huge controversial decision like this, because we will have the first 12-team playoff next year. And even if you feel the wrong team gets left out, there won't be any undefeated or 1-loss, very deserving teams getting left out. There may still be some upset fans. For example, SMU and Liberty. A lot of people would have thought SMU deserved to be ahead of Liberty because SMU may look better than Liberty. But ultimately, being a Group of 5 team, there comes a factor as you don't matter as much as teams in the Power 5 conference. And that's just how it is. Power 5 conferences get more attention, they get more recruits, it's just how it works. And even if some decent teams get left out, it won't matter too much, because they would probably have a couple losses, and at that point you have no excuses for losing that many games. Honestly, I would probably prefer an 8-team playoff, but I also like the idea of a 12-team playoff. So I'm excited to see what happens going forward the next couple years. But it is really unfortunate that Florida State got left out, even after going 13-0 and getting through all the adversity, because this Florida State defense is very legit, and they did not get enough credit this year. And maybe if they had Jordan Travis, they would have had a shot to win it all. I was high on this Florida State team for a while, but after losing their quarterback, I realized the team there without him, and they can hardly score points on offense, and I don't believe they are a top 4 team. But I mean, at least we do have some good matches in the semifinals. You got Michigan and Alabama, which is going to be a great matchup, with Michigan's run game versus Alabama's front 7 on defense. And Alabama has been on a mission, so beating the number 1 team back-to-back games is very possible, and it should be a great game. But you also have Washington and Texas, which is a game that wasn't really expected. And it's 2 teams that have had an amazing rise in 2023. And one of those 2 teams will ultimately be playing in the national championship in 2024, which I doubt hardly anybody expected to see these 2 teams where they are at the start of the year. Another thing that factors in, and I know these are 2 completely different teams from last year, but this game is also a rematch of last year's Alamo Bowl, which Washington won a close game. But then for the New Year's 6 bowl games, you have number 5 Florida State playing number 6 Georgia in the Orange Bowl. This should be a very fun game with 2 angry and motivated teams playing, or we could just see 2 teams who don't play well because they don't care anymore. It could definitely be a lopsided game, but we'll have to wait and see. Then you have an interesting matchup between Ole Miss and Penn State in the Peach Bowl. It's going to be interesting to see that Ole Miss offense against Penn State's defense. That game could go either way. You also have a game between Missouri and Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, another SEC versus Big Ten matchup. So this is really a big game for bragging rights for the conferences, and I'm looking forward to see that game. Ohio State and Missouri should match up pretty well. And then for the last New Year's 6 Bowl, you have Oregon and Liberty. Definitely not an expected matchup, but should be an interesting matchup in the Fiesta Bowl. Liberty has a really good offense. And don't be surprised if Liberty could put up a fight. I'm pretty sure Bo Nix is playing in this game. I would say Liberty has a big chance to put up a fight if Bo Nix wasn't playing, but I do believe Bo Nix is playing. But Liberty should still be motivated in this game. I feel like SMU would have been the better team to make a bowl game and play Oregon. But Liberty was undefeated, so they deserve it even though they were in a trash conference. But those are all the New Year's 6 bowl games, but I'm just as excited for the next game that I'm going to talk about, which is the Alamo Bowl between Oklahoma and Arizona. 2 very improved teams from last year, and Arizona has been really hot this year, and Oklahoma is coming off a nearly 70-point performance against TCU. It would definitely be a very fun game between the 2 teams, and I'm definitely going to tune in for the game between Arizona and Oklahoma. It will probably be a higher scoring game. I will be predicting all these bowl games as the month goes on. I'm going to try to plan a lot of entertaining videos for you guys during the couple of weeks stretch of nothing outside the game between Army and Navy. It's definitely an unfortunate situation for Florida State missing out on the playoffs though. They are the first undefeated Power 5 team to miss the playoffs, but maybe the committee made the correct decision. But who knows? If Florida State can give Georgia a game, then the committee was probably wrong. But if Georgia makes them look like TCU, then the committee might have made the right decision. It's all opinion based. I really think we need a computer-based ranking system so there's no complaining. But no matter what, there's always going to be those loud, obnoxious people complaining for absolutely no reason. But I'm definitely excited for the end of the season. It's going to be sad to have to wait a whole nother year for the next season. And honestly, this year would be perfect for an 8-team or even 12-team playoff because of how many legit matchups we could see in the playoffs. And some of these bowl games might not be as exciting if players and coaches transfer out and don't play, or if they declare for the draft and decide not to play. That's a huge reason we need the expansion of the playoff, because although there may be some good games, the stakes of the semifinal playoff games and national title means so much more than any other crappy bowl game. I mean, a lot of semifinals games end up being blowouts anyways, so bowl season is usually overwhelming, but hopefully it's a little different this year with some of the fun matchups we have this year. And let me know in the comments which bowl game you guys are the most excited for, and also feel free to leave your national title winner prediction in the comments below. But that's going to do it for the video, guys. Let me remind you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And of course, turn on notifications so you'll never miss an upload, because we post daily college football videos. But that's it, guys, and peace out.